In the previous video, I showed you how to find the IPv6 link local addresses of industrial Ethernet switches just using a PC with no specialist tools. In this video, I will show you how to use Microsoft Excel to open the command line and the graphical user interfaces of the switches. To be clear, this is just for interest. If you are managing operational networks, be sure to use the tools provided by the switch manufacturers. I'll start by entering headings for 3 columns. First, I need to know the device name. Second, the IP address. In this case, I'll be entering IPv6 addresses, but IPv4 addresses would also work. Finally, the status. The status column will show whether the switches are responding to pings. It makes sense to test each device with a ping before trying to open an interface. Now I'll add the 4 switches. At the end of the last video, I opened the GUI of each switch, so I'll copy the IP address from the browser tabs. First, the Cisco switch, next the Hirschman switch, the HiESCOM switch, and finally the Moxa switch. Next, I need a couple of buttons to start and stop the pinging. I'll just use some rectangular shapes. Here is the first button. I adjust the size. And add the text. Now I copy it to create the second button. Change the text. It's time to save the Excel file. I'll save it as a macro-enabled file because in the next step I will be adding macros to start and stop the pings. Okay, let's quickly talk about the macros. I didn't write the VBA code for these macros. I copied it from a very helpful website. I've included the URL for the website in the description below. I made some small modifications so the code matched my objectives. To save you some typing, I copied the complete code into the description. Please note that you will need to modify the greater than sign as YouTube does not allow angled brackets in the description. Open the Visual Basic Editor by pressing the Alt and F11 keys simultaneously. Right-click on the VBA project and insert a new module. I'll copy the VBA code for function ping, sub PingSystem and sub stop ping into the new window. Now save the code by clicking on the diskette icon and then close the window. Now I need to link the macros to the buttons. I right-click the Start button and select Assign Macro. Then select the PingSystem macro. I do the same with the Stop button and the Stop Ping macro. It's time for the first test. I click the Start button. In cell E1 you see that the macro is polling the IP addresses. In the status column, OK means that the switch has responded to the ping. For the second test, I'll disconnect my PC's Ethernet cable. The status shows as error because the switches are no longer responding to the pings. I reconnect the Ethernet cable. Finally, I stop the pings. The status goes to stopped and then idle. Now it's possible to ping the switches, which is always a good first task. But our objective is to be able to open the graphical user interface and the command line interface of each switch directly from the Excel sheet. For the GUI, I will use Firefox, and for the CLI, I will use Putty. You will need to know where these programs are located on your PC. I'll start by typing some instructions into the spreadsheet. Double-click to open the GUI and right-click to open the CLI. Then make it easier to read. Now use Alt F11 again to go back to the VBA code. Double-click Sheet 1. Copy the remaining code into the new window. Save the code and close the window. I double-click the IP address for the Cisco switch and the GUI opens. Same for the Hirschman switch. I right-click the IP address for the HiSCOM switch and the CLI opens. Same for the Moxa switch. As I said at the beginning of the video, if you are managing an operational network, use professional management tools. What I showed you is just for interest. If you decide to create your own spreadsheet, I hope you also enjoy setting it up and learn something new at the same time.